The Case of Christine Armande. Ghoul. The following case was reported by the famous Anglo-Irish ghost hunter Elliott O'Donnell in his 1912 book Werewolves. I have edited O'Donnell's original text and tried to put things in my own words as much as possible. But sometimes you just have to go with the master's own purple prose. Back in 1910, there lived, in France, a lovely, rich, and very spoiled young woman named Christine Armande. Christine became interested in spiritualism, taking part in seances where she experienced strange phenomena, strange paranormal phenomena, some of it faked. But she also came into contact, to use O'Donnell's words, with earthbound spirits of the lowest and most undesirable order. Murderers, lunatics, vice elementals, and ghouls. Unfortunately, given a chance, such earthbound spirits attach themselves to unfortunate victims and follow them home. They followed Christine home, rapping on the walls of her bedroom like poltergeists and haunting the watches of the night. In the wee hours, she would often wake up screaming, having dreamt of scary monsters trying to steal her beautiful body and her soul. A spiritualist she consulted told Christine that her dreams were really projections, that she had acquired the power of astral projection through attending seances and now projected herself unconsciously while asleep. A doctor she consulted advised Christine to go to the seaside and lose herself in pleasure, balls, concerts, and theaters, and the whirl of social activity, and of course the company of young men. But the spirits followed her to the seaside and bided their time. As Christine was beautiful and rich, she had many suitors. The one she chose was André Leclerc, the only son of a very wealthy widow. Sadly, before they could be married, Madame Leclerc, who suffered from obesity, had a massive heart attack and died. Everyone, especially Christine, was overwhelmed by grief, for she had grown very fond of her prospective mother-in-law, whom she felt was a paragon of good taste. The afternoon before the funeral, Christine complained of a bad headache and went to lie down. But 2 hours later, strange footsteps were heard coming down the stairs. Wondering who it could be, Madame Armande went to look, and was astonished to see Christine, who stared at her with blazing red eyes, her feral mouth twisted in anger and hunger. Ignoring her mother, she pushed past her and leapt out the front door, which she slammed behind her. Madame Armande told her husband, who immediately went looking for the missing girl, but Christine was nowhere to be found. Late that night, as midnight rapidly approached, the Armandes heard someone pounding on their front door. It was André Leclerc, who looked like he was about to throw up. In fact, there were splatters of vomit on his shoes. "Where is she?" the parents cried. André only nodded. "Please, I must sit down," he gasped. "I don't know how I can tell you." André collapsed into a chair and hid his face in his hands. He was shaking convulsively, like a man in a fit, or a man in mortal terror. Eventually he raised his head and asked for a stiff brandy. After draining it in a single gulp, he was finally able to talk. "When your servant came to my house at 9 o'clock and told me Mademoiselle Christine was missing, I immediately said I would help him search for her. But just then, Jacques, my valet, shaking in fear, came to me and asked me to come upstairs. Immediately. We stood outside the door where my mother's body lay in her coffin, and from inside we could hear the sound of chewing, of smacking lips, of grinding like an animal gnawing on some bones. But that wasn't all we heard. We also heard the sound of heels and the crinkling of a dress. I went downstairs and gathered the other servants, arming them with heavy sticks. We then went back upstairs and threw open the door. We found Christine there, crouching over my mother's corpse and eating one of her stout legs. She had been dining for a while, as the carpet was covered with bones and body parts which looked like chunks of raw meat which had been chewed and spit out. Her face was stained with red gore. Christine sprang from the floor, slashing one of the maids across the face with a hand that had turned into a bloody claw. And then she ran out the door and disappeared into the night, and we don't know where she is gone. Andre was too embarrassed to add, but the main reason they didn't pursue Christine was projectile vomiting, as the ghastly scene before them had made them all sick to their stomachs. Ah, those rich French diets. But I digress. In the middle of the night, the local gendarmerie finally located Christine in an isolated graveyard, attacking a freshly made grave with hands which had morphed into huge murderous claws. Elliott O'Donnell concludes, in the chase that ensued, fortunately for her and for all concerned, she plunged into a river, was swept away by the current, and drowned. O'Donnell concluded, this case of Christine Armande seems to me to be clearly a case of ghoulism. What the spiritualist had told her was correct. She had projected herself unconsciously, and the hideous things she imagined were phantoms in a dream, were elementals, ghouls, her projected spirit encountered on the superphysical plane. After sundry efforts to steal her body, when she was thus separated from it, one of them had at length succeeded, and incarcerated in her beautiful frame had hastened to satisfy its craving for human carrion. Yuck. I don't know what human flesh tastes like, but this whole story is in bad taste. Or is that tongue-in-cheek? And who knew taking a nap could be so dangerous? My grandpa came from Dundee, Scotland, but I have no intention of ever going there, and this is why. A few months ago, a friend of mine was on vacation in Scotland and ended up in Grandpa's hometown, where he and his missus decided to stay in a small hotel my friend described as a delightful old place. A delightful old place. And at first it was. A huge antique lantern hung over the entrance, while inside the rooms were large and low, the ceilings, walls, floors, and staircase all of oak. The diamond-paned windows and innumerable nooks and crannies and cupboards created an atmosphere of quaintness and comfort. Under the cheerful rays of the sun, but still the missus wondered how the place would strike her at night. The room they engaged, not selected as the hotel was full, the room they engaged was at the end of a very long passage, at the back of the house, overlooking the yard. It was a large apartment with a huge bed, a gigantic antique four-poster. The other furniture was equally old-fashioned, But my friend's wife found her attention drawn to a cupboard, a deep, dark cupboard across from the bed. There is always something spooky about cupboards, particularly old and roomy cupboards when it is nighttime and one is about to get into bed. It is then that they suggest all manner of morbid possibilities. So, before turning in, the missus poked about in the cupboard and satisfied herself there was nothing hidden in there. My buddy was sprawled out, busily channel surfing and trying to find something that wasn't in Gaelic, when suddenly they both realized it was midnight, and time they were in bed. It had been a busy day. Once under the covers, the missus said, "You know, I had a weird sensation when I looked in the cupboard just now. I can't exactly explain it, but I wish we had a nightlight." Well, we'll never know what my buddy would have said, as he was fast asleep. The missus lay there, listening to my buddy snore. He denies that he snores. Listening to my buddy snore and wishing with all her soul he would stop that noise, when she suddenly became aware of a smell, a most offensive, pungent odor that crept up her nostrils. The cold perspiration of fear broke out on her forehead. But nasty as the smell was, it suggested something more horrible than, well, the usual bad smells, you know? She thought several times of rousting my friend, but didn't want to piss him off. So she lay there, and each time the fetid stench washed over her, she wondered if it was coming from the mysterious cupboard. At last, unable to stand it any longer, she got out of bed and, creeping stealthily forward, found her way to the cupboard. With each step, the stink increased, and by the time she reached the cupboard, she was almost suffocated. For some seconds, she toyed with the door handle, longing to be back in bed, but unable to tear herself away, until at last she held her breath and swung the door wide open. The instant she did, the room filled with the faint phosphorescent glow of decay, and she saw before her a head, a human head, floating in mid-air. Petrified with terror, she stood stock still and stared at it. It was the head of a man with a matted crop of short red hair that fell over the forehead and ears, but all else was a disgusting mass of detestable decomposition, utterly vile and foul. As the abnormal thing began moving towards her, the spell was broken, and with a cry of horror, she fled back to bed. The head floated after her, and the missus half-dragged my half-asleep, half-awake buddy out of bed before the head could touch him. He's told me he figures he was even more frightened than she was. They both made a frantic rush for the door as the head floated after them. But unfortunately, they tripped over their suitcases and hit the floor, only to find the head had caught them, hovering over them, then descending lower and lower and lower and lower, and passing right through them, then through the floor and out of sight. It was long ere either of them could sufficiently recover to stir from the floor, and when they did move, it was to rush the small, cramped bathroom. What happened then was horrifying, my buddy said, but it was also gross, and you don't want to know about it. You don't want to know. You don't. No. They woke up sick and exhausted and pissed. Staggering downstairs, they demanded an interview with the landlord, who tried to tell him it was all a bad dream, and he was pretty snotty about it, until they reminded him that hotel reviews could now be posted online. The landlord then invited them into his private office, and he began to sing a different tune, and ended by offering them another room on the house if only they would forget about what had happened. I know what you say is true, he said with a whine. But what can I do? I cannot close the hotel and lose all my income because one room is haunted. In fact, most visitors never see the thing. Why it bothered you, I cannot say. What is the history of the head? Well, they say the head belongs to a peddler who was murdered here over a century ago. The body was hidden in the cupboard, with the head under the cupboard floor. His murderers were never caught. They are supposed to have gone down with a ship that sailed from here about that time and which was lost at sea. So that's the story my buddy told me, and I believe him. But I'm not sure it was a ghostly apparition. Could it have been a night floater? One of those malignant beings able to detach their heads from the trunks of their bodies, the heads then being able to fly through the night to attack and molest their victims? The night floaters documented on this channel? So, what do you think, dear listeners? Please share your thoughts and opinions in the comments below. And stay safe, stay subscribed, ring the bell so you don't miss any upcoming videos, and feel free to share this video with anyone you please. If this is your first visit to my channel, please consider subscribing. My name is Warren, and I write and tell original ghost stories and original horror stories featuring such cryptids as the Night Floaters, Werewolves, and the Black-Eyed Children. So again, please consider subscribing. Please help me to reach my goal of 2,021 subs in 2021. or maybe I should make that 2,022 subs in 2022. Till midnight. Cheers. P.S. I told my buddy I thought the head might have been a night floater. He told me I was full of stuff. Full of stuff.